Okay, so let's finish up our bone list by briefly going over these parts of the tibia, the parts of the fibula, and then eventually the foot. Okay, let's look at the tibia first and look at the tibial tuberosity, the medial and lateral condyles, the intercondylar eminence, and the medial malleolus. Here's the tibia and fibula together. Okay, so a couple of things. The tibial tuberosity is always on the front part of the tibia, and then this little indention right, or this little lowering area is actually your inside ankle. It's called the medial malleolus, so it's always on the medial or the inside portion. It's your inside ankle versus your lateral malleolus is on your fibula. So your outside ankle is on your fibula, your inside ankle is on your tibia. Okay, now the other thing is our condyles will actually be up at the top part of the tibia, and it's kind of a little different than what we typically think of condyles. It's still a rounded surface, but it kind of rounds the opposite of the condyles on the femur. So whereas they're rounded downward, this kind of is rounded from the concave versus convex shape. Okay, again, looking at this posterior view, we can see our medial malleolus, so we know this would have to be the right leg because we don't see the tibial tuberosity, so this would be the back. Posterior view, we do see that this is our medial malleolus, so that means this would be the medial side. Okay, but we see then the medial condyle and the lateral condyle, and then between the condyle, we actually have these tubercles with a little ridge running between them, or actually a little depression between that tubercle and that tubercle. That little depression running between these two tubercles is the intercondylar, means between the condyles, eminence. So it's a little depression running between that tubercle. It's like a valley between two ridge lines. So again, very quickly, tibia, large lower leg bone. Front of it has this roughened area that's an attachment site for several muscles called the tibial tuberosity. Backside, that's going to be absent. We have the medial malleolus being the inside ankle that protrudes downward. And again, here we see it protruding downward on the backside. We see our condyles, again the medial condyle being on the same side as the medial malleolus, so here's the condyle. Here we see the lateral condyle, and between that we see these two little mountain peaks called tubercles, and we see a little ridge running between those two mountaintops, which is called the intercondylar eminence. Now the other but lower leg bone is then going to be the fibula, and it's going to have a head. And the head is going to be the upper portion of the fibula, where it would basically attach next to the tibia. And then we're going to have the lower portion of this, which is going to be a little bit more pointed and sharper. This is going to actually be, the head's going to be a little bit more blunt. This area is going to be a little bit more thin and sharper, and this is the lateral malleolus, or the outside ankle. Okay, finally we have our foot. Instead of carpal bones, we have what's called tarsal bones. We still have metatarsals instead of metacarpals. They are numbered very similar to the hand, but instead of having the pollex, the big toe is called the hallux. Therefore, we're going to start numbering from the hallux or big toe over, and have the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth metatarsal. And then our phalanges are very similar, and they are still called phalanges or a phalanx, and they are still numbered the same way. There are 3 of them in all the toes except for the big toe. The big toe only has the proximal and distal phalange, but the rest of the toes have proximal, middle, and distal phalange. And then we have the other tarsal bones, which we will look at. Okay, again, here's my metatarsals from the big toe over. First metatarsal, second, third, fourth, and fifth metatarsal. Then the big toe has a proximal and distal phalange or phalanx. Either term is correct. Here I've got my distal, middle, and proximal phalanx or phalange of the second metatarsal. And here I have my distal, middle, and proximal phalanx or phalange of the fifth metatarsal. So if I were to ask you, what is this bone? it would be the proximal phalange of the third metatarsal. And you would need to tell me, don't just say proximal phalanx or phalange, because that's a proximal, that's a proximal, that's a proximal, that's a proximal. And if you don't tell me of the third, fourth, fifth, second, or first metatarsal, then I might think you're trying to describe something in the hand, because that would be a metacarpal. So again, if I said, what is this bone? It'd be the middle phalanx or phalange of the fourth metatarsal. Okay, now, earlier we talked about the heel bone being the calcaneus, and this bone that actually attaches to the tibia is the trochlea. Okay, so got the trochlea and the calcaneus. Now, I have this very unique shaped bone. I think it looks a little bit like a boat. If I outline it, it's more curved than the rest of these. So notice this little curve here. I could almost make a boat out of it. So this is the navicular. And I think, well, since it looks like a boat and the Navy uses a lot of boats, then that's a good mnemonic for me to remember that. Okay. On the very lateral side, I've got this real big cube-shaped bone, and it's a cuboid bone. Okay, then I've actually got my cuneiform bones with again, understanding the large toe is most medial, going from medial, intermediate, which basically means middle, and then lateral. I've got my three cuneiform bones that are medial, intermediate, and lateral, understanding that the most lateral to them is this large cube-shaped bone called a cuboid bone. Okay, one tool that I've given you is this drawing of the skeletal system, which when that comes up, we can, several pages with many of the pictures I've shown you and blank areas. So what you might want to do is take your structure list and see if you can go through and name the things on your structure. Now, there will be things on here that are not necessarily on your structure list, and I won't test you on anything that's not on your structure list. But notice like that is pointing to the olecranon. Well, that was on your structure list. That's pointing to a styloid process. That was on your structure list. Here's our tuberosity, which is our radial tuberosity, which you would need to put both names since there are different types of tuberosities. So scroll down through there. Look, here's a great example of your hand. I know my saying, some little tiny people try to chew ham, then at least I know the order of these, and then I make sure I put my names, with the actual bone names. Okay, so there's a lot of tools for you to use, including the Mastering A&P, the practice anatomy labs that you can go to that, also help with this. So this is all about putting the amount of time and effort into this to learn these, because you will be tested on them. So, but more importantly, we want you to learn them. So your next step, you will have a certain grounded foundational knowledge that won't be like reinventing the wheel every time you learn a new subject. Okay, this pretty much finishes the bones. So get on this and start learning it as soon as possible.